welcome to Super Respectable. My name is Tosh, and with me is David Lewis. Hey, Dave.
Hello.
How's it going?
Great. How are you?
Good. We were just talking before this. We hit a huge milestone, Dave. We got to start off with it. 5,000 listeners.
5,000 downloads. And thank you to all our listeners, first of all.
Yeah.
Thank you to our guests for, making that happen. That's always helpful that people want to be on the show.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tosh. Thank you, me.
Yeah.
It's great. I think it's a fantastic milestone. It's 5,000 feels like a good number, good achievement.
That's like, I'm thinking of it like I have 5,000 new friends. That's how I'm going to perceive it from going forth. So that's pretty cool.
Could you ever give a presentation in front of 5,000 people?
100%. No, probably not. Actually, I don't really get too nervous when I speak in front of crowds or people and stuff like that. 5,000 is a pretty big number. I think I could be okay. I have this tendency when I talk with a large piece of people, I start to ramble and then I'll make words up and I'll make it seem like they're natural words. So I'd have to work on it. What about you? Do you think you could talk in front of 5,000 people?
I'd get pretty nervous. I'm not going to lie, but I think my main issue when I'm doing presentations is that I start a sentence and I sometimes lose the plot and I don't know where I was going to go with it. And I'm like, well, here I am. I just got to say random words now and hope that it makes sense.
I think us being political scientists and Bachelor of Arts holders, we just have learned how to bullshit most of
We excel.
We excel in this topic. But you know what I think is that it's better to be able to bullshit your way out of a situation than stumble and fall and look clearly like you don't know what's happening, right? So, I mean,
there's like good and bad BS levels. Like there's ones where people are just like, that's it. That's just not happening. What you're saying is just not on. But then other ones that people get so caught up in the words that they don't know what's happening.
Yeah. I have you ever heard a good person speak, like a good orator who can it's amazing, just like
captivating,
just how the words and and how they put it together, it's so smooth. Hopefully
it's crazy because we all speak the same language, we all speak English, but some people really have this way to put the words together in ways I'll never understand how, and I think it can be worked on. I think it can be achieved.
True,
but some people just have that magic touch.
I know a lot of these people read a lot. They have a good vocabulary. They've worked on it, but it's true. Some people are just naturally gifted on it. And I'm thinking of the time that we had to give presentations for our Southeast Asia class. Do you remember? In front of the whole class and at the ambassador's house or whatever, the Sri Lankan ambassador.
That was pretty nerve-wracking for me. Yeah. Because I think at that time, I was like, I know nothing. I don't know anything about the world.
21, yeah.
I don't know. And I'm going to this ambassador's house and he's just going to laugh at me because I'm talking about his country, part of the world I've never been to.
Yeah.
But I was also just happy that we arrived in a Suburban or an Escalade and I forgot about all that.
That was cool. Thanks. That was your friend who hooked us up, right?
Yeah. Thank you to Responsible Choice. If you guys feel like sponsoring.
Choice. That was what it's called. I remember. Yes. Yeah. And you worked for them for a while, didn't you?
I did. I worked alongside Mr. Steve Tomask. We were chauffeurs for a few New Year's Eves.
Yeah.
And that was a very interesting job. Very enlightening. I don't know how much I should be saying on this topic because we were driving home some of the movers and shakers in our town.
Wow.
And they had some drinks and they talked and you learned.
You guys were like the preamble to Uber and Lyft.
It was like a pre-Uber, but I haven't kept tabs on it lately, but it's still going.
Okay.
I'm sure during the pandemic, it's been a real struggle because the events and golf and all that sort of stuff that would require its services have ground to a halt. So I'm sure it's been a challenge, but basically for our listeners, the concept was you drive the customers home in their car. So they drive to the event in their nice car. They decide to have a few drinks and enjoy themselves, and then they leave in their car, but we're driving them home.
Yeah.
And it's a good concept. It worked out well. And
especially for Ottawa, for sure.
Good for Ottawa.
And how is life in the Netherlands? You guys are doing okay? Weather is...
Yeah, we were speaking before we hit the record button. I had my first 5G jab. And reception is good. I got the Pfizer, and some people have had side effects and not felt so good after this, but
So far, you're okay.
I feel okay. I feel like someone punched me in the arm. When I had the initial jab, I didn't feel anything really. I had to like clarify with the person, did you actually do it, or are you still putting like the alcohol on and what have you? But they said, yeah, it's done. Get out of here.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm glad that it's there, and like you'll get the second one in a couple of weeks, and then it'll be.
But here in the Netherlands, it's all systems go, guns blazing. From the 26th, only rule left is social distancing and mask wearing, and that barely happens. So they're saying everything's over.
Oh, really? So you're over the hump. You're clear roads ahead. And how many people have gotten vaccinated in the Netherlands? Do you have a good vaccination rate?
It's really improved over the last month or so. From March, I was thinking, well, I won't be vaccinated until September, October, but they really ramped it up. And I have to say, when the Dutch do government and things that some people are usually skeptical about, they do it quite well.
Yeah.
So it took a while for them to get all the vaccines and the vaccines approved, but now their systems in place. I found the whole thing fantastic. Like one website, you enter in your information, get the 2 dates booked for your jab, and away you go. And when you're there, it's just like, go here, give this form, here's your jab, get out.
Nice. That's amazing. I here in Canada, I feel like no one, everything has been go anyways. People still get together in their groups and this and that, but we are being extra cautious because we have a new member of the family coming. So we were being super careful. And so I think even all of us have the first dose. My dad will get the second dose relatively soon, then my mom, then us. But we don't mind still like just keeping distance and mask wearing and maybe staying indoors a little bit more for the summer just because of the new one. So we're okay with it. But did you hear that in Alberta, which is a province in Canada, a woman who got both her doses, plus she'd wait in there's like a 2-week grace period after the dose for it to be effective. She passed away, but she was 81. So like there could have been an age factor or other health factors, but she still died from COVID in related issues.
Well, what I heard is the Delta variant is very contagious. So even in the UK, where there's a very high vaccination rate, they've had a real uptick in cases. And in the countries where they've allowed travel from UK travelers, I'm not sure if they should be blamed, but it seems kind of like quite a connection that Portugal has a lot of cases now after not having too many.
Yeah.
So it seems like this Delta variant is quite something. And, it's become the dominant strain here in the Netherlands too. So
here in Canada,
I don't know. It's, you got to be on guard. You can't like just sit back. And the other thing to be wary of is like, whereas the West and the kind of richer countries are getting vaccinated at pretty high rates, you start seeing, Sub-Saharan Africa, South America, parts of Asia, the vaccination rates haven't even come close to a decent amount. So there's been like 3rd, 4th waves happening.
Yeah, it's so strange because the other day, just talking about like proximity of countries and just different things, because the States have done a really fantastic job in terms of vaccination rollout. I mean, they're all like they went quick, and like as most people may or may not know, Canada and the States are neighbors. We like literally you can go from my house to the States in less than an hour if you want to.
Oh wow!
But we drove, but the borders are closed. So the other day we actually went kind of close to the border just to check something out, and we drove by a border crossing and it was shut and there was nobody there. It was weird actually. So like it was strange. But the weird thing, I just on a side note that I wanted to say is there's actually a road that goes right by the border and there's no border. You can literally walk across at that point, which was really strange to me. And there were we saw people from having like a coffee from both sides of the border sitting in the middle.
No way.
With their chairs and stuff.
And the border is technically shut. It's been shut for over a year now.
So the actual crossing is closed, but there's actually parts between crossing points, like where it's like the roads. There's no fence or gate. You can literally walk across. But I'm
Really?
yeah, it's people were just saying hello to each other and like having a coffee and walking around. But I'm assuming there's like security that you don't see. Like it
I'm
must.
sure as soon as you walk over, someone's gonna appear out of nowhere
Yeah.
and
My,
take you home.
my sister told me there was a news article about a lady a Canadian who accidentally was jogging and she went over to the States and they detained her for like 2 weeks because
2 weeks.
of it, which I think is kind of excessive. But it was really weird. We just we drove right by and I was like, we could literally walk to America if we wanted to, but we didn't. So there we go. It's my week to present. I chose a topic which isn't too heavy. It's pretty nice, and I think you might find it interesting. It's food related, and hopefully it's something that I've thought about, but it's not really a motivating factor for me when it comes to like food, but it's definitely there. And I think if you are a foodie or if you're into the world of food or if you just are interested in elitism, it's there. But it's about the Michelin star
Oh, nice.
systems. So a lot of people know about the general idea behind it, but there's actually a really controversial and rich history that backdates it, as well as some controversy currently. So people who don't know, the Michelin Star Guide isn't actually what the company is actually known for. It's actually a tire
Yes,
company.
that blew my mind.
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
never made the connection.
so it's very common. People don't put them together, but it's actually the Michelin tire company out of France. It's the second biggest Michelin tire company in the world, and it's the company's been around for like 100 years plus, and it's only like maybe I would say 80 years it's been doing the guides, but it's been doing tires for a long, long, long time, and it since maybe kind of World War One ish, it's been giving these guides. It's been creating these guides to different like restaurants and hotels and mechanics and this and that. And it's only been kind of since that time it's been giving star ratings too. But but the interesting thing about it is that the only reason they started doing the guides was for economic reasons, for profit. And so what happened was in the 1900s, there's only about 3,000 cars on the roads of France. So there's not a lot of cars. So so what this means is tire companies aren't making any money because these 3,000 cars, how often do you need to change their tires?
Yeah, yeah.
So the two founders, Edouard and Andre Michelin, they're like, you know what we should do to increase the demand for
Are they
cars?
brothers?
Yeah, they're brothers. They're brothers. They're
Okay.
family business. So they said to increase the demand for cars and thus tires, we should publish a guide for French motorists, right? Maybe it'll have some useful information like maps and tire shops and replacement instructions, petrol stations. So so they created this guide, and at this point, it had nothing to do with restaurants. It was just one of those map kind of like book things you'd keep in the car. Do you remember when your dad used to go on road trips and they'd be like, "Oh, this is before Google Maps, right?" So these guys created these guides, and it helped. It helped increase. People really liked it. It was free, so that's a good thing as well. So within time, they kind of moved to Belgium. They did a guide for Belgium, for Algeria, for Tunisia, for the Alps, for Germany, and so it started going well. And then as with all things that are free, they're like, you know what we should do? We should start charging for it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't substantial, and this is like almost 100 years ago. Remember, so they charged about current day about $2.15 American for this guide. But what they also started doing was when they started charging, they realized, oh, we're going to be advertising for other people and stuff. So let's add some non-car related issues in there. So they started adding restaurants that you might encounter on the way on your trips, hotels you might stay at. And so they saw that the restaurants really picked up after a while. So they expanded that section. And what they decided to do was, you know what we do is let's review some restaurants by sending some of our staff to these places anonymously, which is where the impetus for the Michelin stars came around. So in 1926, they started awarding stars, but there was only one star at the point. There wasn't this 3-star rating, right? It's only in 1931, about 5 years later, that they started adding 2 stars. The hierarchy started happening. So in 1936, another 5 years later, they started adding the criteria for the 3 stars. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. In 1931, there was the 3 stars. I said 2. So when they started adding the criteria, they added the 3 categories. And do you know what the 3 categories are? What 1 star, 2 star, and 3 star mean?
Can I try a guess, or is this rhetorical? So I think they describe it as in terms of visits, like 1 is, if you're in the neighborhood, maybe it's worth it. Number two, um, maybe a weekend trip. And number three, drive all the way and detour, make a special journey for it.
Yes. So you got pretty much it. So,
The gist of it.
the gist of it, okay. So a one-star restaurant is considered a very good restaurant in its category, right? So yeah, a two-star restaurant is one that they can classify as excellent cooking. It's worth a detour. So if remember, this was a travel guide, right? So get off that main road. And a third star means exceptional cuisine. It's worth a special journey. You can make that drive all the way to that city just for that food. So they had these categories, and then World War II happens, right? So during World War II, they need to suspend the guide. They need to focus on the war. But this is so interesting. It's a very cool trivia fact. But in 1944, at the request of the Allied forces, the 1939 France guide was reprinted for military use. The military thought that, hey, the maps in this guide are probably the best that we'll find, and they're the most up to date. So there's like a military aspect to the guides. So then World War II finishes. They go back to printing the guides, but they're only giving a maximum of 2 stars because most of Europe is like economically in ruins because of the war. So, there's not really it's not the time or the place really to be having excess and 3-star.
Know your audience.
But over the last, know your audience for sure. But since then, it expands to a number of different countries. It comes to America in 2005. In 2013, there's 14 editions of this guide printed that covers 23 countries. So it's really interesting. So now I think we associate the guide mostly with restaurant and ratings, but it actually originated for a different use. And like I said, it's a tire company to start with. It's really strange. If you actually look at the documents and the guides and all this stuff, you'll actually see the Michelin man and the Michelin logo and stuff like that. So
yeah,
it's 2 things that weren't really covered really interestingly.
But it's funny because it's such a fancy 1%er thing now.
Totally.
But then no one wants to talk about tires or think about, car maintenance alongside it. They've managed to totally separate that association.
Yeah, I think that's also a PR choice, I would say, or a marketing choice, because you kind of don't associate those 2 things with the same thing. So maybe it's one company but 2 different products, and then maybe they don't actively try to be like, hey, it's us, the tire people, that's sending high classy restaurant, Okay, so let's get into the food aspect of it. So that's the history. So for those people who don't know, for some restaurants around the world, which serve delicious foods, kind of uppity, high class, they try to yearn for these star ratings, which is pretty much the global standard. So if you get a 3-star Michelin rating, you're pretty much quote unquote, the best restaurants in the world, right? I don't agree with that personally, but for the sake of food related discussion, sure. So how does Michelin do this? They have reviewers, which are commonly called inspectors. They're completely anonymous. They don't identify themselves when they go to restaurants. They pay for their meals themselves, i.e. from Michelin. They never get a free meal being reviewed because it could corrupt the process. And so what they do is that these people, their full-time job is to go to restaurants in their region, almost about 250 to 300 meals a year, and just inspect, eat food and review it. And so
the inspectors by the size of them.
Yeah, that's true. You could be like that guy's an inspector. And they anonymity is so important for Michelin that there's many top executives in the company of Michelin that don't even know who the inspectors are. The inspectors are advised not to disclose their line of work.
They're not on LinkedIn?
They're not on LinkedIn. Sometimes their families don't even know what they do, is because they don't want them to boast about what their children are doing in anonymity. They really take this seriously. They're not allowed speaking to journalists. All they are supposed to do is that they go to these restaurants. They have been trained in the field. They write reports on the food, and then they have these things called stars meetings, where all the inspectors in one region will come together each year and then review the restaurants and then agree unanimously on the restaurant ratings. So there are about 40,000 restaurants and hotels which are reviewed around the world each year.
That's got to be expensive.
Super expensive. 150 inspectors globally. Just to put it in perspective, they say, for example, in the UK, there's about 12 active inspectors. Each inspector does about 260 to 300 lunches or dinners per year.
No.
Yeah, that's insane, man.
260?
to 300, yeah, lunches and dinners per year. Sometimes
200, 200 to 300.
yeah, 200 to 300, and sometimes they're going at lunch and
Wow.
dinner. And here's the reason why. If it's a 1-star restaurant, meaning it's been like you're going to give it a star or it's been given a star, you probably totally visit it about 2 to 3 times a year.
That's what I was going to ask, because they must go back more than once to make sure that it wasn't a fluke or there was an off day or something.
But if your restaurant's been given a 2-star or 3-star rating, you, not you, but like inspectors will usually come between 10 times a month just to ensure that it's maintaining that standard.
Wow.
Maybe you showed up on one day and it was a really great meal, really great service, but not that next day. So they need to make sure this is a sustainable thing. So I found this thing, which I'll post on our website or on our link. It talks about the criteria that these guys use to judge food. So there's 5 kind of restaurant criteria. Number 1, you're looking for the quality of the product, which understandable. I understand. Like when I go to a restaurant, I always be like, this is crap. This is good too. I think that's fair. You're looking at the mastery of flavor and cooking techniques, which I think that's more on a higher level. I'm not really experienced. I mean, I can tell if something's been cooked well or not, but I don't really know like techniques based on food. Do you?
I can kind of like distinguish between this is a crap cook, this is like a run of the mill like fries and burger place versus a nicer restaurant. But I probably couldn't break it down too much further.
I can tell also on ingredient. I can tell like if it's like something's been fried in crap oil or in good oil or
for sure.
I think that's good. But so what happens is a lot of these inspectors actually come from the hospitality and food industries. So they're not only like and they don't not only have been have a background in it, but also Michelin also trains them in like how to taste for wines, how to go into a garden, like a lot of little details in terms of food. So they definitely have a background that they're looking at. Number 3, they're looking at the personality of the chef represented in the dining experience. So if people don't know, a lot of Michelin star restaurants become famous and then in turn the chefs become famous, or a chef is famous and thus it makes a restaurant famous. So foodies definitely, it's like celebrity culture for chefs, I guess. Foodies definitely will try to go to a restaurant because this chef is cooking there and he's famous for doing this with his, and like he's well known for like, blanching the potatoes this way or whatever, you know what I mean? They're looking at value for money, meaning like it's not overtly expensive, not overtly cheap. Though I will put a footnote on this. A lot of new Michelin star restaurants are actually really more affordable. They're not the high class things that they used to be commonly associated. And then number 5, they're looking for consistency between visits. So like I talked about, this is the reason they might go to a place for 10 times a year or 10 times a month, right? Can they maintain that standard? Which is crazy, isn't it? Like that's insane. But yeah.
I've heard some stories about the inspectors, like they'll do certain actions to test the staff. Like they'll, drop one of the napkins on the ground and see how long it takes for it to be noticed, or they'll do something that's a bit off, and then they'll wait to be corrected somehow by the staff and see how the staff like communicates that correction instead of saying like you're wrong. They'll be like, well, we would consider dining in this way and blah blah blah. So it's all these like really things that you have to be on guard for all the time. And I don't know if you've watched many of these documentaries, because there's all sorts of, like you said, celebrity chefs. I don't know, Gordon Ramsay is probably the most famous of them all. And it's so popular now to have these kitchen documentaries where they scream at people and stuff.
They don't like that.
And I mean, I think Gordon Ramsay is an extreme example, because I don't think all chefs are like that. But there must be a certain level of professional tension that, is that the inspector there tonight? It's got to be on your guard, because the ones who are trying, not every restaurant, as far as I know, tries to get a Michelin star, but there's some who try. Right. And they're like always nervous about it, like looking out into the dining area to see if someone's there that looks like an inspector.
In an interview I watched, one chef pretty much equated it to, it's like they're in such high stress levels all the time because it could be any time. It's like he said like it's like being in your final year of high school, and that day will decide whether or not you graduate. It's like that all the
Yeah.
time.
Do you
So
think that the restaurants on like conversely would employ like people to monitor pictures, have monitored who the inspectors are?
there's actually there's a movie with Bradley Cooper called Burnt.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
I
It's
want to see it.
it's insane. Like I would just kill myself from stress. Actually, I'll talk about how a lot of chefs just don't give a shit anymore. They're just giving them back, and they don't want their because there's a lot of negatives with
You
this.
know,
Yeah,
sorry. This is a very interesting topic for me because I've read a few factoids on it.
yeah,
Apparently, because Gordon Ramsay, the guy who trained him, I can't remember his name, Marco Pierre White.
yeah,
He's famous for having like given back his Michelin stars.
yeah,
But apparently, it's not possible to give back stars because the guide exists.
yeah, yeah.
Like they have a rating, and it's not like you're handed the stars.
Yeah.
He's going to appear in that list regardless.
Well, you can lose a rating by not maintaining the standard for the
But you
next,
can lose, yeah.
but you can't give it back. That's true. Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. So I sent you two links. Check out the one that says you can open both of them or whatnot. But so these are some of the countries like that, like some of the Michelin stars are in, and like the best restaurants around the world. So
No Canadians.
interesting fact: Canada, our home country, has no Michelin star restaurants, 1, 2, or 3, which is unique. But Michelin argues that we just don't have a guide for Canada. That's why.
So
Yeah.
I saw this one again. Sorry to interrupt, but
No.
there is a bit of like political angle to it. So I was curious. I'm like, why does Canada, a pretty rich country with, it's not globally known. People don't go to Canadian restaurants around the world,
Sure.
like an Italian or French restaurant, but we still have good restaurants.
Yeah.
So I'm like, there's got to be across the country one. And I was surprised to see that there wasn't.
Yeah.
And I read about like how South Korea made like a tourism push. Like we need to have things that make South Korea more dynamic than like our neighboring countries. And from like a standing start of, I think 0, they got quite a few in the Michelin list.
Yeah.
So I think if Canada were to market themselves accordingly, they might get some.
Yeah. Or maybe, we have great restaurants. I have to, anywhere, like you can go to any city and you can find great restaurants. Maybe, yeah. I mean, maybe they just haven't pushed there yet. Maybe they don't give a crap. Like maybe they know their food is good. Maybe we're just being Canadian. But if you look at the list, of course, the most popular, the country that has the most Michelin stars or 3 stars is France, the originating country. So there's there. Then Japan, which is interesting. Japan has really made a huge push. If you look at its culinary history for this cup, Tokyo, Osaka, some of the smaller cities. And then the States has the number 3, but Italy is number 4 too. So like I read somewhere that it usually for the longest time before the States, it was France, Japan, Italy. Those 3 countries were kind of going. Mm-hmm. So if you look at like some of the world's best restaurants, they're mostly European based, including your home country right now, the Netherlands. They have 2 Michelin star, 2 3-star Michelin star restaurants. So, but North America, not so much. But tell me, because you've lived in Europe for a while, like what do you think is the reason for that? Food culture?
I think, yeah, there's a criticism around Michelin that it's too Eurocentric, and that's probably fair. But the other angle to that is when people crave certain foods.
Yeah.
I mean, when you go out for dinners, generally the nationalities that get chosen are Chinese, Indian, not so much French. Like people don't go for French takeaways, but like French restaurants is a big thing. But it wasn't until I lived in Europe that like I went to French restaurants because
it's not.
I don't really know
Canada, right? Like
it's like classic. It's like the super classic cooking.
Once a
Whereas
year.
Italian cuisine is very popular globally because people know pizza and pasta, and it's very easy to make.
Yeah.
By and large.
Yeah.
But French cooking is like known for being like kind of challenging recipes and like real gastronomy.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's been like criticism that it's like very Western Europe focused, but I mean, to be fair, it is from France. So what do you want?
Yeah, that's true. It's really interesting. That was one criticism I read. Another criticism was that they favor Japanese cuisine a lot too, and they're like a little too generous. And one of the arguments, it's so funny. One of the arguments is that maybe one of the reasons they want to do that is because Japan has so many car manufacturers that they want more time.
Oh yeah, so, and I think the number 1 tire company in the world is Japanese. So they're trying to
but then Michelin says like no, there's like 160,000 restaurants in Japan, right? And then like only 40, like so like of course they're gonna like if you look at the numbers, then they're gonna have more good restaurants just because the sheer size just starting off with, right? Uh, um, in the Wall Street Journal actually wrote that in a report in 2010, they said that some Japanese chefs were actually surprised that they were receiving stars and actually were reluctant to accept because this is one thing we talked about is because if once you get a star, a lot of things happens to your restaurants. You get more bookings, which not every restaurant can manage. And yeah, and in Japanese culture, if you ever go to a real Japanese restaurant, I'm not talking about like Joe's Sushi Shack. I'm talking about like real Japanese. It's really small, and so their tradition is to kind of have less people but more frequent, as opposed to more frequent people, like bigger size. So having more bookings and having more attention really disrupts the traditional customer experience and lowers the quality. So a lot of people in Japan like are like, we don't really want these stars, and we're really surprised we're getting them. But on the other hand, I'm sure some people love them, right? It's really good for business too. Like for
Yeah, I mean, there's a great documentary, I think it's on Netflix, called Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Yeah, totally.
And it's great because the guy is so focused, and it's what's well known in like Japanese culture is in some professions, they do one thing, they do that their whole life, and they do it very, very well. Yeah. And so this guy spent his whole life making really good sushi, and his sushi restaurant has, I don't know, 2 or 3 Michelin stars, and it can only seat whoever can fit around the bar, basically. So maybe 6 to 8 people.
Yeah, it's for sure. Like I think there's that. One of the other, so they interviewed this guy. His name was Pascal Remy. He used to be an inspector, and then he got fired for what he did. But he talked about his life as an inspector for Michelin, and he said that it's extremely lonely. We get underpaid. We have these huge pressures to meet deadlines. We're always eating alone at restaurants, which is, I understand, that's kind of sad. He says like there's not enough inspectors for France, like which I guess could be echoed for other places around the world, especially if you're having to eat 260 to 300 meals alone just per person. That's insane. And he says there's a lot of favoritism with famous chefs, meaning Michelin will try to like, the chefs that are already well known, try to keep giving them stars. So he he actually asked permission to write a book, and they said no, and then he wrote it anyways or something, and then they fired him. So it's a difficult, there's a lot of problems there. But speaking of problems though, from a chef's point of view, I was watching all these reports that some chefs really don't like the stars, because once you get a star, you're overworked. Some of these chefs work
the pressure is so hard.
Pressure is crazy, and the stress to maintain that level. Some of these chefs are working like 70 hours a week, which is crazy, because most chefs the restaurants like at this level, they're probably open kind of in afternoon, evening, dinner time. So a lot of these guys are working like, like crazy hours starting in the afternoon into the middle of the night, sleeping, and then redoing the process over and over and over again. And so one chef, I forgot his name, I'm sorry, but he actually committed suicide in 2003, a very famous chef in France, because he thought he might lose his.
Yeah, I heard about that.
You heard about it, right? So like, it's a lot of things. So, I mean, like, do you think it's worth it? Like, I don't know. I mean, it's all this prestige, but it's all this like hard work and stress to get to it. So, which could take your life, right?
I think, there's some great restaurants. There's Noma in Copenhagen, which has been known as like the best restaurant
Have you gone
in the world. No, I've seen it in my own eyes, but it was like never had the chance to go and pay in real life because the bookings were for months and ahead.
It's like Danish food or something, right? Or like
but the thing is, it's like my point was essentially he was doing that, I think, regardless of Michelin. He's just super creative and like thought of like, hey, let's make Danish food cool.
Yeah,
I got all these great ideas and let's serve it. And that attracted stuff. But so it's a bit of like chicken and egg. So some chefs just want the Michelin stars and they work to achieve that. And some chefs are just super creative and they're like, oh, we're going to get that. And thank you very much.
Yeah.
And they don't care so much. So maybe they're better off because they're less bothered by it.
Yeah. I think it's definitely an art, cooking, and you really need to love it. And like some chefs are trained, like Jiro, right? This is kind of like I think his dad taught him or something. And then he's teaching his sons are like sushi masters as well. So it's like a family. You really have to love it. I'm not really into like super fancy foods. I like kind of, if I could take like I probably like a 2 level or a 1 level Michelin is kind of like okay for me. But like super fancy foods, I just find like the experience non-enjoyable. Like, you know, like the way you have to eat and the portions and the price and like this and that. I'll do it once or twice a year if I look for an event. But like I love kind of like hole in the wall places or places where you can get like a cheap, good, delicious meal, but mix that in with like a fancy meal once in a while. I'd like to
Have
go
you
to.
been to a Michelin star?
So I've been to the closest place. I think I went to. That's a good question. No, you answer first. Let me think if I went to a Michelin. Have you?
Yeah, so I was lucky in Budapest. There's quite a few,
Okay.
and I made it my mission to go to all of them. So I've been
Okay.
to, well, I think I went to four there. I've been to two in the Netherlands, and so I think I've been to about like seven or eight. No, I've been to about eight or nine Michelin star restaurants in my life.
Oh, good.
Um,
And like, what kind of food did they serve? By the way, like, what
but
kind of?
then, so that's another criticism. So basically, there's a uniformity of like fine dining of what people kind of think of
Yeah.
when you get a Michelin star meal.
Yeah.
It's basically like multiple courses.
Oh, yeah.
You can order four is basically the starting point, and then you go five, six, seven, eight, and then you can get wine pairing alongside that, and it's just unbearable. Like you cannot possibly keep up with that much wine. Um, but they're quite small portions of each one, so each like tiny little
Yeah.
dish is super creative. But it's they use a lot of foams and a lot of like fancy smoke and mirrors
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make it look nice.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have to say that it is an event to go to one of those things. It's like
Get
it's
spot.
good once.
Yeah.
I really couldn't imagine being like a full-time consumer of that stuff because, like you said, you gotta mix it up, right? Have McDonald's once in a while to try the amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Because if you're always having Michelin star, you've lost like sense of reality.
I watched this documentary on Noma, and they had like a 10 course or 15 course dinner where they give you like small little portions continuously and this and that. And like I think it's good to experience things, but you can't make that a habit because like that's unsustainable and also just like gross after a while, isn't it? Like you want to eat that,
Well,
or you want to eat a
I
fresh fruit,
mean,
you want to do this and that, and like it's not a thing that people do every day.
I yeah, I mean the food that they serve you is high quality ingredients,
Yeah.
but it's quite rich, right? Like so they're going to give you, some pretty fancy steak or fish or like they're doing a lot more vegetarian stuff these days, which is
Yeah.
good. Um, but yeah, I can't say that it's the healthiest thing to do because
Yeah.
sure you're going to have a few vegetables and a few of your five a day, but
Yeah.
it's probably not the same as having a salad and a bit of chicken,
Yeah.
which is probably healthier for you. But just to have the experience, I think it's fine once in a while.
Well, so I checked. So I've been to one Michelin star restaurant. I went with our friend Marcus in Malaysia. We went to
Oh
Nobu,
yeah,
the Spanish Japanese like sushi paella, like some combo,
no, it's not paella.
and like it was fun. Like it was a good experience and stuff. I've been to Wolfgang Puck's restaurant Spago in Istanbul, which I enjoyed for our anniversary with my wife. But generally speaking, I'm more of like a $10 18-piece sushi or a $6 shawarma or like I really enjoy that kind of. One of the things I don't like about fancy restaurants is like you have to be really really cautious of how you eat and like using your napkins and this and that, which I understand, but like once in a while just eating a sandwich is like, and you get a little messy, sure you can wipe it off, but like you're always having to be on guard at these places. So it's like you have to dress a certain way, which is fun. I don't mind doing that, but like you're not always present with the food. You know what I mean? There's also like an environmental factor and a societal factor and stuff. And there's other people there who are doing it. So like, yeah, I couldn't be an inspector, nor do I have any intention to do it. But it's interesting to see how all these restaurants are kind of like pushing for it and craving for it and trying to claim the title of like the best restaurant in the world and this and that. I don't know if you can really be that title, right? Like, is that really possible?
Yeah, I don't think it's an appropriate thing because there's always a push to categorize stuff, and top 10 lists are really popular.
Sure.
But it's kind of like any kind of artistic thing. It's, in your background, you have books. one person's favorite book is another person's least favorite book, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with movies. So of course, there's some movies that are much better ranked than others, and by and large, society will say, yeah, Citizen Kane was better than Freddy Got Fingered or something like that.
I'm sure
Right?
we'll find someone who will say the reverse, though, Dave. I'm saying
Yeah,
that.
but equally, you'll find someone who loves that movie and hates Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
So beauty is in the eye of the beholder, as they say in France. And
Yeah.
and yeah, so saying like there's one best restaurant in the world is a bit dodgy. But it
What
probably sells some marketing materials and gets some events and awards shows happening. So
Well, one thing that Michelin has started to do is they started to add, they have the 3-star categories, but they've also started to like include kind of like price limits on some of their like newer categories. So they'll say the best meal within X dollars. They've started going to some pubs in Ireland as well, including them. And they're adding
yeah,
environmental aspects and sustainable foods. And like, I don't know if you heard or not, but like a couple of years back, this kind of like street stall in Singapore
yes,
got a Michelin star. They call them hawker food. And so this guy was doing chicken or something in Singapore. So like he got a Michelin star too, which is like, and it's really just like a run of the mill, like food court thing. So they're definitely starting to expand. But like I've had delicious meals in the middle of nowhere, and I've had really good meals in okay restaurants, and I've had horrible meals in fancy places too. And so I like the experience when I go, right? Have you ever been to dining in the dark where it's all black and then you can't see?
oh yeah, no, have you?
Yeah, I've been twice. It's really, I mean, I didn't think, to be honest, I didn't think the food was like phenomenal, but the experience was completely memorable. And it's
How
really,
come you don't spill the food on yourself? I mean, there's nothing.
you're eating like really like tapas foods and like very, very like slowly. And like you have a waiter who's also visually impaired who kind of walks you through it, which I thought was really cool. So I've been places like that. I've been just 2 weeks ago was our anniversary. Went to a revolving restaurant on Vancouver, and it was okay. It wasn't like great. It was too expensive, but it's okay. But
But
yeah,
do you have a best meal? Like, can you remember like that was the best meal? I want to go
oh,
back there.
totally. I'll tell you mine, but you got to tell me yours then after.
Mm,
So my best meal, I had this tuna sashimi sandwich and burger in
mm,
Hawaii. And it was like a raw piece of tuna sashimi, like a big fat one, and it had like I'm sure it had some sauce. I don't remember the details, but it was
mm.
so good that I think I ordered two like that night. So like it was really good. And I'll give a second one. I had calamari in Las Vegas with my mom, and it was at like Caesar's Palace. I don't know if anyone's been to Las Vegas or not, but Caesar's Palace is like a city like in itself. Yeah,
Mm.
you've been to Las
I've been, I've been to Vegas.
Vegas. We'll do an entire episode on that one. We'll get everyone involved in that story to be
Yeah,
yes.
we should.
So I had calamari that was so good that we had to walk. We came a couple of days later. We walked back. So I remember those two. They're pretty memorable. You?
Yeah, I think I'll give two.
I mean,
One was Hawaii, so that's good news.
oh, okay.
It was at a luau. Do you know
Yeah,
what those are?
of course. I went to.
So you went to one. So
Yeah.
that should be up there. So the luau was very cool. I think it was the two that I'm going to mention are based on like the overall experience. So the food was really good
Yeah.
for sure, but like we had it on a beach and they had this meat
Fire.
on a fire pit
Yeah.
and the people doing fire acrobatics and stuff. So I mean the whole thing was just really really impressive, and I was 12 years old, but I still remember like that was a
I
great
was
meal.
12 or 13 too. I mean, not that was the first time I went to Hawaii, but yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
And number two,
Yeah.
or number one,
Yeah.
they're interchangeable,
Yeah.
was in Sardinia.
Mhm.
So we went to a agriturismo.
Yeah.
So they're basically farmhouses where they'll
Lunch.
either you can stay overnight,
Yeah.
but most of the time it's just like a converted into a restaurant.
Yeah.
And the food there was incredible. The thing that I never really got my head around was the dining times in the Mediterranean countries. So we showed up super early, and the chefs were just like getting out of bed.
Yeah.
But it was just the same thing, like in the countryside of Sardinia, which is gorgeous. The food was prepared in this huge kind of like basically a huge pizza oven, but they put in the meats and everything in there. as well as other places. He had multiple courses. I didn't think I was going to survive because it wasn't like Michelin style portions. It was
Yeah.
each thing was a big pile of food. Um, but it was great. So um,
What?
that's it exactly it because I've been to Michelin star restaurants, but those weren't the best meals of my life.
Yeah. Okay. Quick question for you. What about if I could say in Canada, best meal in Canada?
In Canada, the poutine, là. Every time I had a poutine and a shawarma, it was very good.
And shawarma?
Uh, no, I know. I think, these are things that probably should get Michelin stars. I mean, I think if you could find a really good shawarma place in
Oh,
Ottawa, give it a
100%.
Michelin star. Those
100%.
places are delicious because that's gastronomy. They think they're very unique.
Hmm.
The turnips and the garlic sauce and the meat. So
Yeah.
those are really, really good. In
Affordable.
terms of like a sit down restaurant,
I,
there used to be this restaurant in Ottawa called Domus,
yeah, yeah.
and it was Canadian food. So it was like things like elk, bison, so kind of animals that you wouldn't necessarily find in other parts
Syrup.
of the world. Maple syrup. Maple syrup.
Yeah.
So I think it's good. I think that Canada should do a lot more
Yeah.
of Canada is obviously a country of immigrants, and they're going to have really good food from these immigrant countries.
Sure.
But I think it's time for Canada to do a lot more Canadian food and try and discover what that is.
Yeah.
So try and do the Noma thing,
Yeah.
and maybe more Indigenous First Nation stuff. So
I agree.
that could be good.
I think, yeah, I mean, like when I travel around the world, I definitely try to like find good places to eat or like a coffee is my big thing. Like if I find a good coffee shop, that's where I'll go. But that's not really food. That's just coffee, morning coffee. But yeah, like I'll definitely spend more time looking for good food just to experience. And if I can experience that culture's cuisine, like instead of like, you go to some country and you have like McDonald's and like, really, what's the point in doing that? Like, so if I can in authentic cuisine in a country would be great. But one thing you said, I definitely agree, is I think the Mediterranean countries really know how to do food properly. It's like natural, it's healthy. I know there's a lot of courses, but it's like an experience, and it's really like you don't feel guilty. It's not like you eat fried chicken, you know what I mean? And you feel horrible. You like
That's very healthy.
fresh tomatoes and the greens, and then like the breads is not too meat heavy, which I like as well. There's a lot of, and you feel good afterwards. And so when I was living in Morocco, we were eating that stuff like all the time, and it was fantastic. Okay, I have
Super respectable.
super respect. Okay, my next question is: are there any restaurants or types of foods or chefs or something that you're like looking forward to eating, or you hope to eat one day, or places to go?
Maybe I would try a 3-star restaurant once just to tick that box and say I've done it.
Any
There's
country?
one about an hour away from us here, so that's a possibility.
Which one?
I've got to pick up that Wikipedia page again, but it's on that list,
Is it?
I believe.
What's the? There's two. There's De Libri
Interscaldes is the one near me.
and Kruningen.
Kruningen, yeah.
Oh.
I find it incredible that restaurants have Wikipedia pages. That's just fantastic. Wow.
Is it? If you go to Interscaldes, is it expensive or is it affordable, or how's food
I'm
generally?
sure it's expensive. Well, these so in Budapest things are slightly cheaper, but these Michelin restaurants would be priced for tourists, I think, for the most part, because the meal was just way above like the average salary in Hungary. I mean, the prices are crazy.
What's the
So
most?
these
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Please finish. Go ahead. Please. I didn't mean to cut you.
No, they're just really another reason why it can't be more than once every 6 month thing is just, it blows a hole in the budget.
What's the average amount you're comfortable spending on a meal, and what's the most you'd ever spend on a meal?
If we go out for dinner on a Saturday, 100 euros
For two of you guys.
for 2 people.
Yeah.
So that's if we're going for like, more than pizza. So if it's like an appetizer, main course, dessert,
Fancy, like a once every couple months thing.
every couple, yeah. And then most expensive or most you've ever spent? Oh man, there. It was actually in Croatia. I think it was a place where we spent like 300-400 euros.
Yeah, it's pricey, man. It's happened to me a couple times too.
Yeah.
I had a friend, we'll keep them nameless, but if they listen, they'll know who it is. They didn't know how much it was going to be. They told me their meal came to $2,000.
2000.
He told me he had to go to he was with a group of people, and so I guess a lot of rich people, and so people were going this, and it was like a really fancy restaurant. I guess alcohol, this and that. And when he saw the bill, he said he had to go to the washroom and like like put water on himself, and like he was like, maybe I'd steal like a ashtray or something to make up my money. But yeah, there are places that are crazy. I once went to a meal, so stupid of me, with my wife in Hong Kong, a sushi restaurant. And you've been to Hong Kong, like there's no space this way in Hong Kong, so everything is vertical. So it was on like the 10th floor of this high rise or whatever. It was a fancy sushi restaurant. And it was like a 3-4 course meal of like little pieces of sushi, $200 American. And it was like, it blew my mind because it was pretty much our budget for the entire week for food.
Oh no.
And so I learned, but I'm with you too. I think if I go to like a fancy dinner, maybe once every 2-3 months, $100 is fine. For that one dinner a year, which is really special, like which is really high class, maybe 300, maybe, and then on an average day, on an average outing, anything between 10 and $20 might be enough for me. Like my sushi combo, which I love, is like 1994 or something, which I always like once a week.
I think where you're saved is that the consumption of alcohol.
Yeah.
Because that can really blow a hole in the budget if you point at the wrong thing on the wine list.
And then you're like,
it's like going to an auction and you've raised your hand at the wrong time. There's some crazy expensive wines out there.
Are you a wine connoisseur, or do you go for the like the
I'm not. It's strange. I mean, we did these wine pairings a few times, which I don't recommend because you just can't keep up and you're going to get totally drunk after like, halfway through. Of course, I can taste differences in the wine, but if someone says like, describe the wine, can't do that.
Yeah.
Where was that, like a Sauvignon this, or was that this? Even the most basic names of wines that everyone should know, I know them, but I couldn't attribute it to the glass I just had.
Like this can be an entirely different episode. Some people are really into it, and it's like their life, and like the oak mixtures and the smells and the odors of which farm and which vineyard it was grown in. But yeah, like I think generally that. And then one thing I take as a privilege is I lived in a lot of places which had good food, but for really affordable money, right? So Malaysia was really cheap. Morocco was affordable. Turkey was really good. Like we went to, like I said, we went to Spago, which is Wolfgang Puck's like premier restaurant. It started in LA, and then he opened one location in Istanbul. And the amount of money it cost us just for 2 people with dinner, like a really good dinner, was equivalent to like it was not equivalent to what it would cost in LA, right? It was in Turkish lira, so it was really cheap. But yeah, that's sort of my approach. But I will say, as we near the end of the podcast, there is one restaurant on my list that I really want to go to, and it's Jiro's restaurant in Japan, like the sushi restaurant.
Oh, sure, yeah.
In the Tokyo subway station, because I love sushi so much, and I know it's like $200 a person, but he'll make it for you like a 10. That's the only one I'll save and I'll spurge money for, because I really want to have sushi from a sushi master. That's my whole thing.
I think yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. I think that's a place where I would love to go to. I've never been to Japan, and after watching that documentary, I would love to go to a great sushi ramen place, try all these fantastic Japanese foods from the source. And the thing is, like some countries, I think Italy doesn't really lend itself to Michelin star dining, because there are really good Michelin restaurants there for sure, but like Italian food is pasta and pizza and variations on that. And that you can't really do like fine dining with that. But there are some really, really good meals in Italy you can have. And they're just so pure. They're like, people get angry. There's really long debates that they have in Italy. You can see people talking in the streets, doing this and waving their hands in the air. And then I'm saying, what are they arguing about? They're saying you shouldn't have added, parsley to that meal. You should have just left it, this or this. Because they get really passionate about like the purity of the recipes. So they shouldn't be messed with. Whereas Michelin dining is like trying innovative, creative things.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, some people, no, I definitely understand that. I mean, I have to tell you something. I went to Italy, and maybe it was just because of who I was with or where we dined. I really did not enjoy the food, but I think I had really standardized food, like a margarita pizza, and then
it's easy like to get ripped off in some of these places, like especially Rome. It's hard to know where to go.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
You know what food I actually think is really good is like Southern food in America, like a Black African American cultural food where they have like meat and waffles or like greens and like ribs and stuff. I think their combination of foods is actually really delicious and tasty as well. But I think generally my thing is I'll try every food in the world, and then after that, if I like it, I'll continue. If I don't, at least I've done it. I'll try everything. I don't mind. And so wherever I've gone in the world, I've always tried to eat local cuisine. Some of it's been delicious, some of it has not been delicious. So like I think that's sort of the approach that I like to take when it comes to food. But I'm interested in the Michelin star idea. It doesn't motivate me for food, but I like the business capitalism aspect of it. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. And the other thing I quickly mentioned is that one of my best holidays was I went to San Sebastian for a surfing trip on my own.
Nice.
And it's a fantastic foodie destination. So really, really good Basque cuisine. And it's approachable and accessible from like the most basic level to Michelin level.
Really?
And it was kind of funny when because traveling on my own, you've done it before too. You have more attuned senses because you don't have to talk to someone the whole time. You're like listening to other conversations, you're hearing and smelling things. So because it's known as a foodie destination, this is all pre-corona stuff.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people from various parts of the world, and they were going there because of the food factor.
Yeah.
And a misconception with the Michelin guide is that not everything in the Michelin guide is like Michelin star.
Right.
Because they'll recommend stuff, but it's not a starred place. So there's even things below, there's like a plate or a fork or a knife or stuff. I don't know what it is. Yeah. But it's just, they're good places, but they're not 1, 2, 3.
Right.
But I saw people talking, I'm like, this set is supposed to be Michelin. This is just like,
yeah.
What is going on? They're writing angry reviews online.
The waiters got flip-flops on and like,
yeah, but it was just a good restaurant. But it never claimed to be anything else. So you could see that they're getting cursed by the Michelin guide.
I mean, I remember I went to this restaurant in Laos or Cambodia. It was in my Lonely Planet travel guide. And the reason I'd gone is because the owner of the restaurant was actually hiring like felons and people who had been convicted out of jail as employment. So they were trying to really do something for society. So I thought that was pretty cool, you know? So let me go check it out. The food was not great, but the service was amazing and the people were super, super nice. And I don't regret going at all. So like if I can find like a twist on something, I'll definitely try it out. And then if I can add another layer, if you can get good food at the end of the day, it's delicious, which is affordable. But some of the best places I've ever been to have been like street vendors, hole in the walls, places around the corner. In America, if you ever go to New York, those $1 hot dogs, they're not bad. Like they're pretty good. So like, yeah, I think you just mix and match and you try to do what you can. But one thing I think we can take away is like, I really hope Canada ups its game a little bit more, or at least gets more recognition, because we do have good food. Like we really do in certain places. Montreal's really good food destination. One time, my mom and sister and we drove from Ottawa just for lunch because it was like we went to the Italian part of Montreal. We had pasta and like bread and carved up, and then slept on the way home. You know, so like in Ottawa, I lived there. That's like my second home. That has a lot of good restaurants, I think, too. I just think it needs a little bit of better PR, better marketing,
I think, yeah, there should be more Canadian pride in the Canadian cuisine. I know like people say the same thing about the Netherlands. What's Dutch food? It can be pretty bland. Exactly. So it can be pretty stodgy. Like if it's traditional stuff, it's basically like mashed potatoes with leeks and sausage and cheese and pretty heavy stuff. Yeah. But you know, there's a few Dutch restaurants where they'll try and mix it up a bit and modernize it. I think that's nice.
No, but you know what? My argument is if the Americans can make their food like Michelin star worthy and internationally recognizable. And American food really is just like processed fast food garbage, right? From the origin, but they've been able to develop it, right? And add different twists and culture and like different tech. If they can do that, then I think any country in the world has the ability to kind of build on, because the Michelin,
for sure.
Michelin, they're not saying that your food needs to be like this culture or this food, right? They just needs to be fit those qualities. So if you have a chef who comes from X place and you try to mix it with another cuisine, and you might come up with something cool that like you might be able to produce something really delicious. It doesn't have to be pure in its origins. It just has to meet the criterias of what they're looking for, if that's what you're looking for, right? But if not, just having good food all the time is good. There's like a couple of restaurants near my house where there's lineups all the time, and they're like breakfast joints or they're like brunch places. And so like I don't really stand in line for anything. I'm too big for that. So like, but I'll definitely go to certain places which are good. Because for me, just as we end, I'll ask you too. Like for me, I love brunches. Like I love like a weekend brunch, like a pancake, a waffle, a coffee. That's what I'll go for. Or I like going for like a sushi or a fried chicken or like some type of dinner. So it's like usually brunch and dinner are my big things. I usually don't go out for lunch that often. But if I can go to a place where I know that at least, I can balance the money versus the quality of the food versus the atmosphere, that's like a winner on all three for me. But I don't know what your criteria is.
Yeah, I feel the same. I think we found our good balance of restaurants. It takes a while when you're in a city that you've just getting used to find the right where those places are. But we have a good rotation of like once you found your favorites, you tend to like go back to them because like you've tried the range.
Yeah.
But once you know that you found your good places, there's a great Italian pizza place around the corner. There's a fantastic French restaurant in the center. Yeah. And then there's there's a special place for like fancier food when we want to do it like once every 6 months.
Did you do that? Did you find your favorite places in Budapest and in London as well? Like, did you have your little location? Yeah. You and I went to in London. Didn't we go to with some type of Indian food or something, right?
I remember. Yeah. It was off the main like shopping street.
Yeah. And then we had coffee. Yeah. That was good. And then like I'm like you too. If I go to a new place or if I live in a new place, once I find my good rotation of places, then that's it. If I have one bad experience at a place, I never return.
Game over.
It's really, I know it's like it's a thing because there's certain foods I'll order at certain restaurants just to see the quality, like at a new place to see if I'll do it. Like, so if I ever go to a burger joint, cheeseburger, it's like my main thing, if they have it. And if it's a good cheeseburger, then I know I'll come back to it. If I go to sushi, I know which rolls I'll order. If I go to pizza, I know that I want this pizza. So I don't really experiment. Like I'll try the new food. I'll try that, my common food. And if it's good, then I'll try other foods. But if you screw up on a cheeseburger, then I know that you can't do anything else properly.
Yeah, you're not competent.
You're not competent.
The other aspect is tipping. So like in Europe, I'm so relieved that tipping isn't like an expected thing. So I'm going to be ruined when I go back to Canada next time because I don't like it. I just hate the concept. I mean, I will give money when things are done well, when something's nice, but I won't give it every time. But the problem that I have in Canada and the US is it's expected every single time. And if you don't give a tip, it means you hated it and it was that you're making a point.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like legislated because I don't know if it's still the case, but like serving staff, their minimum wage was like $3 or $4 less than everyone else's minimum wage. So you were expected to like help pay for their life.
So where is it? London, where it's included? And like it's actually like written on your receipt or your bill or something like that? Or
sometimes they'll say tip included, or but in the Netherlands, there's no expectation.
Yeah. Let's clarify to all our listeners. Dave and I are not anti-tip people. We believe in tip for good causes. But I'm with you, man. Like it's tough, especially during COVID and stuff. Because with all takeaways, I don't know if you've been tipping, but I don't really give tip on takeaway because I know. But I will give a tip if it's worth it. But please leave it to me at what discretion. I don't like the standardized like 15, 20, 25%. Like 25% is a crazy amount, man. I'll give
huge.
It's huge. On $100, that's $25, So like I'll give what I can because no one's tipping me for my life. So, but I'm not stingy too. If it's a good service, I'll try it out. But I usually range in the 10% range. That's me personally. And I think that's usually reasonable. And like, I had one, I'll just end on it. I had one situation where I didn't tip and it was because I was with friends and I thought they had tipped. And like, as a group, we were paying individually. And most of the time when you don't tip, you might get a dirty glance or this and that, but usually people don't say anything until you walk out. Like, you have timing yourself. You're like, okay, go. And so the owner of the restaurant was like, did you get bad service? I'm like, no. Then he's like, why didn't you tip? And
no way.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought like my friends tip and stuff. And so I had to go back and add some extra tip.
I don't like that though.
He was really ballsy about it. So
I'd say it's not my job. I'm sorry. You'll get more than compensated from every other customer.
It makes the tipping, it's a really weird system that we've started and it makes no sense and you can't really back out of it. I mean, like, you don't really get tipped for other types of professions as well. Like I know you're supposed to tip your hairdresser and this and that. And like, some of it makes sense, but some of it doesn't. But at the end, it should be based on your discretion. And if you don't get tipped, you should accept it in life and just move on. Like, it shouldn't be an expected thing, you know?
Shouldn't think that that customer was a jerk because they didn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Even like when I do tip here, people go, "Whoa, thank you so much. It's so nice of you." You know, if I like round it up by like $1 or a euro or two,
yeah,
it's just not expected.
yeah,
And yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, I don't get tipped when I do my everyday work. I just don't see why it should be a regular thing. I mean, you get a bonus maybe in some companies. You get a bonus at the end of the year.
yeah.
That's your tip. But yeah,
from an MBA point of view, from both of us, and it's a completely illogical system for owners. They might get a little percentage of it, but most restaurant tips go to staff, right? And from a customer point of view, it's like one more thing to think about. It might have been normalized by now, but from a completely business point of view, in my opinion, it's a really illogical and extra step in a business process in a transaction where it's product and service, product and result. It's one more thing you have to add to the layer, which I think is silly, but it's okay. I don't mind it, but I think the general rule should be like either it's mandatorily like it's already put into your bill at a standardized, agreed upon rate, not like like they do in the UK, for example, or wherever. And if it's a reasonable amount, like I'm not 15%, I think is too much, but or it's up to you completely with no repercussions of what you say or do, and et cetera, et cetera. But like, I don't tip on takeaway. If the service is really good, and especially if you're going out to like a Michelin star restaurant, just to tie it back, if you're spending $300 on a meal, 10% is $30. Like that's a lot of money. That's like,
and that's the thing is like, there's really like,
yeah,
inequities. Is that the right word? But so if you're going to McDonald's, you don't tip them.
yeah.
But you go to a Michelin star restaurant, you're expected to tip a huge amount of money because of the status of the place that you're at.
Yeah.
Whereas the people who are working at McDonald's probably need the money a hell of a lot more.
Totally.
And there's no tipping culture at McDonald's as far as I know.
Can you imagine if we go to McDonald's and we tip? Or like,
why isn't there? There should be.
There should be 100%. It's the same thing when you go to a really fancy hotel. Wi-Fi is an extra $10.95, but if you go to the Best Western, it's not included. Like there. You know, so like Best Western, McDonald's, please let us know. Not McDonald's, but like all the other places, the tip regulators of the world, let us know what the common thing is. But it's one of those extra stresses I always have when I go to a new country because I don't know the customs and the rules. I'm trying to figure it out. People never tell you exactly. You ask them and they'll, if they're nice, they'll be like, "Oh, what?"
In Japan, they get offended if you tip them. Apparently, it's an offense because they say we shouldn't be paid extra. We're doing this as our job, and it's like insulting to them to here's a little extra.
Yeah. I know it's I give it to my wife to do at this point. I'm also not made of money too, so like it's reasonable. Like you got to be super reasonable with things, and I know restaurants suffer and like there's a COVID and stuff, but like we all don't have unlimited amount of money. Like we all have to be cautious with our money because it's poor financial discretion if you're just tipping all the time to all these people large amounts. Like it's silly, right? I don't know.
It is, but at the end of the day, we should all try Michelin stars once every 6 months and enjoy life.
Agreed. I think if you've got a Michelin star restaurant in your country, please let us know if you've gone. Let us know if there's like what type of foods you like, what you do. Just interesting to talk to people about food aspects and the business of food and the government of Canada. Please work on the Michelin star issue here, man.
Do something.
We're so proud of our country. We should be proud of our cuisine too.
Can you imagine just the first Michelin starred restaurant in Canada would get overwhelmed? They would absolutely get like inundated because
I know more than likely it'll probably be Toronto or Montreal because can you imagine if it was like Regina, Saskatchewan or like Yellowknife? Like, destination. Yeah. It would get inundated with people, but I think it would be a really good thing because I'll tell you the one thing I do is whenever I travel or visit family, I bring maple syrup cookies, our famous maple syrup.
Oh no.
And they're so good, Dave. They're so packed with sugar. It's not good for you. But like, if that's an indication of our food or quality, then we're on the right track. I think we're okay, man. I think you could definitely put together a good meal, a good 5-course meal, 4-course meal of maple
salmon, maple syrup for dessert, maple cookie for takeaway.
Just maple. Like I said, I think there are so many talented chefs in this country. If you gave them like a little bit of time and resources and ability, they could definitely put together like a really eclectic Canadian array of cuisines.
Absolutely. That would be super respectable.
Super respectable. Anyways, thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Tosh. That was a very interesting episode.
Yeah, hopefully we don't get any backlash from Michelin. But if we do, that's okay. We're not like a tire company or tire promoter in any way, so we're good. Anyways, be safe, take care, and
take care.
Bye-bye.